Karşılık ver. Efendim, taret takıldı. Nişan alamıyorum. Örs 1 konuşuyor. Pusuya düştük. Tankım... Örs 1 konuşuyor.
هيا بنا إلى المعركة. هاجموا الموقع به.
في 3 عربات مجندرة للعدو ومتجهة إلى قوة الإبرار. انفصل وتعامل معهم.
دبابات للعدو. أطلق النيران، أطلق النيران. لقد وصلنا الهدف بنجاح. دبابة للعدو 200 متر. اللعنة لقد أصبنا. طائرة للعدو. لديك ثقب في جناحك الأيسر. إني أهاجم.
What the holy kebab was that? Probably that's what you're thinking of after watching this intro. And before you get your knives out, a disclaimer has to be made before we start. There are lots of other nations that deserve a better slot in-game. So I add my voice to the guy asking for the Czechoslovak tech tree, the Koreas, India and Pakistan, Brazil and Argentina. I add my voice to those people. And I know you might say, well, why specifically the Arabic tech tree? And my answer is, throughout the last 7,000 plus years, no other region had constant war like throughout the recorded history, like the Middle East. And ever since the Sykes-Picot Agreement, tanks and aircrafts have been rolling in the region non-stop. With too many nations being added as a copy-paste vehicles, except some few tanks and aircrafts, maybe we can add the Arabic nation or league that represents all the Arab nations. So either an Arabic nation and an additional tanks and aircrafts from other nations, or the entire Arab League and it's represented with full tanks, a full aircraft lineup, as well as some premiums. And I know some of you might say, what did the Arabs build or modify? And this is exactly why I made this video, is to address how the Arab tech tree would look like, why the Arab player base is very low, and other stuff that can add more value to the game and make it more enjoyable and more playable, and would allow Gaijin to focus on new stuff rather than destroying the economy more than it really is bad. And also would avoid Gaijin to go into that same hassle like what we had recently with the Steam bombing, with everything that was around, the angry players, including myself, and lots more. I'm going to address this on multiple levels. How many Arab players do actually play the game, and why is the number very low, and how to attract that audience, and what benefit would it add to other players and Gaijin, as well as the feasibility of having an Arabic tech tree to the game or adding it to the game, and what vehicles would it bring, and what strength and weaknesses would be in that tech tree. So welcome to Dada channel. I'm a new YouTuber who happen to play War Thunder most of the time. Most of my videos are in War Thunder in Arabic. And if you look down there at the bottom, you will find that it's like 1.2k subscribers so far. And this is basically the entire Arab War Thunder player base. Plus some family members, plus co-workers who felt embarrassed to turn me down when I told them, you know what, I do have my own YouTube channel. Wow. So they feel like obliged to subscribe to my channel, at least for that moment, and then they delete the subscription. So 1k is basically the number of total players who might be interested in the game, not necessarily playing it. And there are actually multiple factors why the Arab players are very low in game. Starting with available languages in game, you can see German, you can see English, French, Italian, even Chinese, but you cannot find the Arabic language. And due to the absence of Arabic interface and Arabic language or dialogues, people in the Arab world don't understand the game. If you look at other AAA titles like Battlefield, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, and others, or even underdog games like World War III or PUBG Mobile, they are so popular in the region, they are so playable, people watch them and play them all the time. And this is all because the Arabs can understand the game and understand its mechanics from the interface itself. And even if the game doesn't have an Arabic interface or Arabic dialogue, like for example an old game called General Zero Hour, it didn't have any kind of Arabic language representation, but it represented the Arabs in one way or another. Not necessarily the best way is, but it actually gave the Arabs some sense like, yeah, you know what, it's fun to have our appearances or culture or whatever shit we have in a game. And this is exactly why these games are very popular in the Arab world. And a game like War Thunder with very complex mechanics, controls, weapon capabilities, game economics, and more, Arabs have hard time to understand the basic stuff in the game. I can't stress enough how much questions I get on daily basis regarding the game mechanics, the settings, the economics, that can easily be read from the forums or from the interface itself, but for them to understand it, it's impossible because they don't speak or read English by any means. So it's not possible for the entire Arab population to understand the game. Some of them do, I do, but for most of them, they need someone to translate it for them. In addition to this, the Arabs are represented with very few vehicles, only 2 copy-paste tanks, 3 aircrafts, only one of them is unique, the other 2 are copy-paste, and 1 ship which offers unique gameplay. And that's it. That's all the Arabic representation in the entire game. And I'm going to talk about what vehicles can be added in a bit, but for now, let's continue with the player base. Another factor that is impacting why the number of Arab players is very low is the presence of the tech tree for Israel. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't care much, but a lot of Arab players felt that they need to boycott the game of its entirety as a kind of protest. For me, the protesting is basically, okay, you know what, I won't play this tech tree, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy the game. Actually, yes, I don't play the Israeli tech tree, but I do enjoy killing the Israeli tanks. I mean, if I see 5 tanks looking at me, aiming at me, and 1 Israeli tank looking the other way, I'll probably kill the Israeli tank. That's how I feel it's like. I enjoy it. I enjoy the presence of the Israeli tech tree. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Israeli tech tree needs to be removed. No, on the contrary, and to the dismay of a lot of my Arab fellow mates, I feel like its presence is crucial. I mean, there are some unique tanks, there are some vehicles that were heavily modified, like we have, and they deserve to be represented by all means. And this puts us in a bit of conflict because there is very minimal Arab representation, and also there is a very heavy representation of Israeli tanks and aircrafts, helicopters as well. in the game, while almost the entire Arab nations are totally neglected. So more Arab vehicles, aircraft, tanks, ships, helicopters being represented in the game will be better, and if they are represented in a separate tech tree would be great. And after all, the Israelis were not fighting the USSR or US or Germany or Japan or Sweden. They have been fighting the Arab nations since the start of their existence. With that being said, more Arab players can be filling the games, more noobs that can be killed, more happy players in the game. You log in, you open a game, you start a game, you go in, you find the full server instead of a half-full server or an empty server, and you feel like the game is offering much. And on Gaijin side, have you guys ever heard about the Saudi guy who bought a real airliner for his kid thinking it was a model? Whether that news was true or not, it reflects the fact that the Arabs, specifically the Gulf region, are actually willing to pay tons of money for items, which is in case of War Thunder is a bunch of pixels, but Saudi market in gaming, for instance, is booming, and I think Gaijin should make use of that. I mean, think of it, Gaijin, it's money, money, money. I mean, you don't need to destroy the economy system or piss off existing player base to make more profit. You just need to target a broader audience. That's my point of view. You don't need to ask for more money from the original player base. All you need to do is to look for broader audience, new markets, new people, new tech trees, new stuff to be added to the game. Now, to the last part of our video, what would an Arabic tech tree bring to the table? What kind of vehicles? And what are the strengths and weaknesses? When you think about an Arab tech tree, you will either think of a Toyota tech tree. I mean, look at this guy. He actually rents his Toyota truck for his friends to chill while smoking hookah. I mean, I would like to be that kind of person. But anyways, or you might think of it as a copy-paste vehicles all the way from lower tiers to up tiers. After all, the Arab armies have been gathering equipment from many nations. For instance, Egypt does have weapons from US, Russia, China, France, UK, and that's only Egypt. Before I started this project, honestly, I didn't expect much. I didn't have much expectations whatsoever. But when I went forward anyways and I did my research, I actually found a lot of unique vehicles and domestically built vehicles and abominations of heavily modified vehicles. Also, the Arabic tech tree can start from BR 1.0, unlike other nations in game. The Egyptian Air Force was established in 1928, so basically it had biplanes, Spitfires, Hurricanes, and a lot more. And even Arab nations like Iraq followed in 1931. They had as well their own air forces. For instance, Egypt and other countries built weapons systems under license, like for example M60, M1 Abrams, Gazelle, Alpha Jet, which is a trainer attacker. Also there is the Tucano turboprop, which also acts as attacker and trainer. Helwan HA 200, Al Qahira subsonic trainer. We have even newly established local navy industry building corvettes for the Egyptian Navy. And this is just Egypt. If I add countries like Algeria, you will find they have actually designed their own drones. They have built their own versions of the T-90 and the BMP-1s, as far as I recall, and I think also they have the BTRs with advanced weapon system. And even if you look into the Egyptian industry, other light and heavy weapons like machine guns, artillery, anti-airs, also domestic designs like Fahd armored vehicles, which has multiple variants, and even domestically designed aircraft from the Cold War era called HA-300, which actually was a cooperation between Egypt, India, and Germany. Messerschmitt was working on that aircraft with the Egyptian authorities, and actually its engines, though they were used in the prototype, they were also used to power some Indian aircrafts later on afterwards. And you will also find some homemade weapon systems mounted on outdated or upgraded equipment, Western weapons installed on Soviet equipment, and vice versa. Also, another thing I noticed is that the Arabs didn't start adding some fancy names to their vehicles until quite recently. So yes, you will find some fancy names like Merkava or whatever kind of fancy names like in the Israeli tech trees, but also they do have very unique weapon systems that were very heavily installed on the old tanks they had. So for example, you will find M60s, T-54s that have upgraded weapons and upgraded systems. Ramses II is basically a Tu-54 T-55 with an M60 gun and weapon control system and engine installed on it, as well as an additional wheel. But it's very unique. I mean, you can't find it elsewhere. Also, you will find the Jordanian Falcon or Iraqi Al-Kafil, which are basically totally upgraded or armored weapon systems that have been modernized by these countries. Some of the abominations I found were based on a gun licensed and built in Egypt and Syria. You might find the 122mm Soviet gun in almost every chassis you can think of. Egyptians and Syrians have mounted on every obsolete tank they found, from M4s to M113 APCs to T-34s to BMP-1s to T-55s. After all, I mean, they couldn't install it on a Toyota. If they could have installed it on a Toyota truck, they would have done so for sure. For instance, Egypt have bought Bradley turrets and installed them on no longer used M113 APCs, which in turn made them more capable fighting vehicles, those APCs, and at the same time it's not as expensive as the Bradley, so it's way at a very lower price than the Bradleys. Even in aircrafts, small changes did make huge differences on the battlefield. For instance, in the attrition war, due to the low fuel capacity on Soviet fighters, this gave the Israelis the upper hand in the fighting. All they needed to do is actually fill their aircrafts with fuel and fly towards Egypt. Egyptian fighters scrambled to engage. The Israelis avoid engagement and fly away, but stay around until the Egyptians stay in the air long enough till their fuel runs out. And once the Egyptians try to fly back to base, that's when the Israelis strike. And this gave them like a very huge advantage over the Egyptian fighters. But the Egyptians modified and added drop tanks to their obsolete Soviet-built aircrafts, and that changed the course of engagement and gave the Egyptians at least a fighting chance. Such modifications won't matter much in the game, but in real life it made a huge impact on how the battles went. That brings us to the end of the video. I've shared in the description below the tech tree proposition as much as I could. I've collected, I'm sure Gaijin can do a better job, as well as images on which I based this tech tree, and you can have a look and let me know if there are other vehicles that can be added, if it does make sense, if it doesn't, what you think of about this tech tree. And if you're still watching to this moment, that means that you are interested in what this channel offers. And if you'd like to see more videos in English, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have a thought about this topic, don't forget to add in the comment. I might switch the channel to English or balance between Arabic and English videos. And if I can get enough interactions for this video, I might do exactly that. Thanks again for watching, and see you in my next videos.